All right. So, welcome everybody to the next speaker in our speaker series. Glad you're all with us today. We've had a couple of really good conversations so far, and I'm also really excited about this one. We've been talking to Chris for months about this right now, this moment. So it's kind of cool that it's finally here. But I want to introduce you to our speaker, Chris Langford, who is a practicing therapist. He owns and operates Excelsior Consulting in New Jersey. And I know that there are a number of our interns this summer who are psychology majors and others who are pursuing work in social work. So perhaps to you particularly, this might be of interest, but you don't have to be a psychology major to find this conversation interesting, I'm sure. So we did send you Chris's bio. You've probably had a chance to look at it, so I'm not going to kind of regurgitate all of that for you now. But I wanted to highlight a few things that I think were probably pretty formative to him. One, he moved around a fair amount in his childhood. And there were other things that happened in his childhood that were experiences he had that probably had a pretty big impact on his interest in psychology. And in fact, he told me that he knew he wanted to be a psychologist at a pretty young age. So, Chris, maybe we can explore that as well. And also, impressively, very impressively, Chris has not one but two master's degrees in psychology. And through his studies and through his work, he's discovered how important it is to have mentors and that they were critical to his success. So I think he's got a great perspective on that. And so I'm looking forward to him sharing that with us today. So with that, welcome, Chris. Glad to have you here with us.
Thank you. I just have to give one minor correction. My practice is called Excelsior Counseling, not
Counseling. What did I say? Oh, I said consulting. It was a typo.
Okay.
Apologize. Excelsior Counseling. Yes, thanks for that. Cool. So, Chris, welcome. Is there anything you want to sort of say to kick us off, or are you okay to jump into me asking you some questions?
Thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you to all the students and participants who are here who are listening. Yeah, let's jump right into it.
Okay, cool. So, first of all, maybe you could tell us just to, we'll loop back to this, but in terms of where you are today in your life, and so you are a practicing therapist. Could you talk a little bit about your work and what you do? And I know what your specialism is, but maybe you could share that.
I am a licensed professional counselor. My specialty is anxiety and trauma. So individuals who have experienced really difficult things in their past that they are struggling to get past. The two things that I like to say kind of direct my job and what I do is I help people become the best versions of them that they can be. And I like, when it comes to dealing with trauma, I like helping people change themselves from seeing themselves as victims and more of survivors. Seeing yourself as a survivor, it's a bit more empowering.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way to look at it. So when we were catching up a few weeks ago, you shared with me you knew at a very young age you wanted to become you had an interest in psychology, and there was a TV show, I think, in particular that you liked. Maybe you could share that. But even going back a little further, because you had a really interesting childhood and that you moved around a lot and you grew up largely on university campuses. Can you share a little bit about your childhood and what that experience was like?
Absolutely. My parents were both college educated, but my father was an educator and a coach. He was kind of chasing his dream of becoming an athletic director, which he was thankfully for him was able to achieve. So that was a motivator for me. That was an inspiration for me. But also on college campuses, kind of being surrounded by higher education, what life could be, where I could be if I wanted to. And even at times that, it seemed like, oh, this is a foregone conclusion. There are points in high school that what if I don't want to go to college? And my parents would kind of just laugh at me and say, no, this is happening. Um, it was it was helpful to see this is what next steps after high school can be, and not to feel like I didn't have that option. So in that I was very privileged and very fortunate. When it comes to wanting to be a therapist, as you said, I knew from a very young age that was what I was going to do. I'm going to date myself here. Um, there used to be a show on Comedy Central called Dr. Katz Professional Therapist. Essentially, it was a squiggle vision cartoon where Dr. Katz would sit down with different comedians and run through a mock therapy session. The therapy session was essentially comedians doing their bits. And along with being hilarious to a 13-year-old, I thought, how amazing is it that you can sit down with somebody and listen? And just by the fact you're listening to them, you're able to help them help themselves. You're able to help them move through very difficult things. And I was inspired from there on, and then, in high school, learning about what therapy really meant, getting to take a psychology class in my senior year, that kind of solidified everything. It's like, no, this is it for me. This is what I want to do.
That's cool. That's really cool to have that clarity early on. And I shared with Chris that I too in high school planned to become a therapist. I knew when I left high school, and I didn't even take a psychology course in high school. I don't know where this came from, but I wanted to be a psychologist. So before I even taken any class, I declared my major in psychology. And in hindsight, it was a huge mistake because I got halfway through college and I realized, wow, I don't think I really want to become a psychologist. So I have a real appreciation for you knowing that from so early on and sticking to it. And as I said to kick off, that there are a lot of people in our program this summer who are majoring in psychology. So hopefully we get some questions from them through this conversation. By the way, as a reminder to the interns, you're welcome to raise your hand if you want to jump in and ask a question, or you can type in the comment if there's anything you want to ask of Chris. So I'm just opening my comments and I got a big message. So Chris, so maybe let's also go back to like the fact that you moved around a bit, and I think you were born in Illinois, is that right?
Yes. Born in Evanston, which is about 10-15 minutes northwest of Chicago.
But that was your early childhood, and then right, how long were you there?
Oh, I think we moved to Maryland when I was about 6.5, 7.
Okay, and do you remember
And
that
from
being sort
then
of
until I was 20. Oh, no, please go ahead.
so yeah, there's a little bit of a lag, so I don't know my connection or your connection, but so just you had said you moved to Maryland when you were about 6, and then you cut out.
Yeah, I was there until I was about 21, 22, and then moved to New Jersey.
Okay. And did you, because I moved around a lot too, so I'm projecting here, but did you find that those moves had made an impact on you and sort of your sensitivity to what others are experiencing?
Absolutely. There's in a positive and a negative way. There was a sense of being a little bit untethered. Not really, even though I spent a very long time in Maryland, when I moved, it felt like, that home base was taken, which was, very much a throwback to being 6.5, 7. Illinois was my home base. Everything I knew of as being in the Chicagoland area. So to move was really frightening, and it was very unsettling and untethering. But post college, I was able to reframe some of that and recognize that untethering can also be very freeing. I don't necessarily have to stay in one place. Mine doesn't be in one place. It can be anywhere, and that definitely filled me with a sense of hope and a sense of freedom that I could move on.
And I think that's such an interesting, because that's the second time where you've referenced the mindset shift, where something is it is easily interpreted to be very negative. But Lo, you said instead of you when you're working with your patients, to seeing it to be becoming the best person they can be. And then this is, you're moving, and one hand you can look at it as the rug is being pulled out from under you, but then you can turn it around and say, wait, I have an opportunity here to do something new and different. And I think that's a valuable perspective uh, for our interns to hear. And one mental trick it took me years to get, and that is challenges at work can become very emotional. You can feel a lot of stress and tension, and things are out of your control, and the fight or flight response occurs. And it was probably in my 40s that I realized, wait a minute, it doesn't have to be this way. I can decide that this is more of an intellectual challenge, something for me to figure out, as opposed to just having this visceral response to whatever was going on around me. And in your work, because it took me so long to figure that out on my own, is there something that our interns can take on board as like a practice for them to sort of think about, wait, let me take my emotion out of this for a second and try to figure it out as an intellectual problem to solve?
There's a couple ways that you can do it. Probably the most helpful, though, would be to kind of take a mindfulness technique and say, you know what, this is what I'm experiencing right now, but it's going to pass. I may be experiencing some discomfort. I may be experiencing some anxiety. I may be experiencing some sadness or anger or frustration, but it's not going to be around forever. It's going to pass. Our emotional states, they don't stay forever. They eventually move on. And even that can be very freeing.
Yeah, just recognizing that it's a feeling, and allowing you to sort of accept that. That's cool. Cool, good. Thank you for that. So now looping back to you and your experiences. So where did you attend high school? That was in Maryland.
That was in Maryland, yes. It's Old Mill Senior High. It's the Patriots.
And what was that, like a DC, greater DC area, or was that more rural?
That part of Maryland's an interesting place. I was right around that DC government corridor, but I was also between Baltimore and DC. So we had Fort Meade, NSA, Goddard, all of that around us. UMBC was up there, was where my dad worked, but also not too far from Hopkins and from University of Maryland, Baltimore. So I was kind of in that area, which was very much very much government corridor.
Yeah, cool. And so you graduated from high school, and where did you go to college?
Started at Bowie State, was there for about a year. Unfortunately, money dried up, and so I had to put myself through about a year and a half of community college. And then I was able to take advantage of a tuition grant when my dad became the athletic director at Fairleigh Dickinson. I was able to transfer there and have part of college paid for. It's never all of it. But I was able to transfer there and finish. Got my bachelor's at Fairleigh Dickinson.
Okay, great. And that was your move to New Jersey, I presume, at that point. Yeah, good. So I know we have students on this call who are in Ohio. There might be one or two from California, and also several from Connecticut. But the biggest group of interns are from New Jersey, and I know you live and work in New Jersey now. So did you find that was like going from Maryland to New Jersey? Was there any kind of culture shock related to?
Oh, huge culture shock. Huge culture shock. Even though even though DC is very cosmopolitan, and Baltimore to a small extent, there were really only three cultures around, subsets within, Caucasian, but black, white, and a smattering of Asian. Moving to New Jersey, I went to the metropolitan campus of Fairleigh Dickinson, so that's between Teaneck and Hackensack, New Jersey. I was literally thrown into the melting pot, and I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. I was literally meeting people from all over the world, which was, even though I didn't necessarily or want it to happen the way it did, I very much wanted to be in a place where I was meeting people from everywhere and learning about cultures from everywhere. And ultimately it was a fantastic experience.
Oh, that's great. Very cool. And was there any sort of I know you discussed the financial challenges that you faced, but in terms of lessons learned or things that you had to overcome, it sounds very exciting, and your disposition I know is very positive, which is tremendous to have that disposition. But were there any challenges you had to overcome? Any sort of life lessons that you took away from that period?
Couple. One being emergencies, disasters, things like that can happen at any moment. You can be doing well, and at any moment an emergency can come up that will do a serious number on your bank account. You can move from financial stability to poverty very quickly, and it's important to be mindful of that. Initially the takeaway was, I have to worry about that. That has to be a fear. Through my own work, I was able to recognize, well, this doesn't necessarily have to be a fear, but something to be mindful of. So getting to live through, I literally don't have any money, so I'm going to have to, I worked my way through college. I worked my way through graduate school, learning how to make do with very little, and learning that it's okay to ask for help were the big lessons that I took away from my college career and even into my early to mid 20s.
And that asking for help, and then that sort of is maybe a good segue into mentors. And I know you've had a number of great mentors through your life, but how did you figure out who to ask and what to ask when you knew you needed help? Was there a logical place to go, or did you have to kind of figure that out and discern who to talk to?
It was less a logical place to go and more of a feeling. So anybody who's experienced kind of a lot of interpersonal personal difficulties where you've either felt or been victimized, or you feel like you're being empowered, you're going to recognize who feels safe to be around and who doesn't. And so, there were a number of people who tried to influence or guide or say, oh, this is what you should do, or if I were in your position, I would do this. Feeling whether or not this is a safe enough person to listen to kind of guided me towards, I'm not going to take what you have to say. Thank you for your input, but no thank you. Or you're safe, I'm going to listen to you. What can we talk about here?
And that's, just that alone is really profound, because I don't think I would, again, I'm projecting a lot, and maybe none of our interns have this perspective, but when I was a young man in college, I would say any person of authority, if they told me what to do, I'd say, okay, this person told me what to do. But you were able to determine, okay, this person is, and maybe they're not going to give me the best advice given where I am in my life. And I think that's an important thing for people to recognize, that you are. We heard this from another one of our speakers a few weeks ago, and the only person that can make you happy is you, and the only person who can make the right decision for you is you. So I'm
Absolutely.
kind of seeing a theme here. to reinforce for our interns that just because some person of authority told you this is something you should do doesn't necessarily mean that's the right thing to do. Yeah.
I would say from the logical standpoint, if there's somebody in your life who fosters hope, doesn't instill hope, hope has to already be here. But if they can build on the hope that you have and can build on the perseverance that you have, that is a decent mentor right there.
Hmm.
Somebody who recognizes what you want, recognizes where you want to be, where you want to go, and genuinely wants to help you get there, there's your mentor.
And often we think about, oh, well, I need a mentor might be a thought somebody has. But you don't necessarily have to have one mentor. You can have a lot of different mentors depending on where you are in life, or even at the same time, different aspects of your life, right?
Absolutely. We all have different aspects to ourselves, and a mentor can come in any shape and size. You can have professional mentors, you can have personal mentors, you can have life skill mentors, depending on, again, who feels safe and who is going to foster that hope that you have in yourself and that perseverance to go where you want to go and to achieve what you want to achieve. There's the mentor for you.
That's great. So you're at Fairleigh Dickinson, getting an undergraduate degree in psychology. And what did you graduate and say, okay, now I'm going to become a therapist, or did you know you needed to do other work before you could get there?
No, I did not do as well as I would have liked at Fairleigh, and did not graduate with a GPA that would get me into the doctoral program that I thought I wanted to be in. So no, I didn't go, okay, well, I'm just going to be a therapist. I decided, okay, well, I don't have the GPA. I don't test well in terms of standardized testing. I didn't know at the time that I suffered from massive test anxiety. And so I thought the GRE, I'm not going to bother taking. That's the graduate exam, similar to the SAT, but a lot more difficult. Um, so I decided, well, I need to start thinking about other careers that might be good for me. But while I'm doing that, I need to work. I need to experience working and living on my own. I took a job that a friend helped me get in a software company that was a very bad idea. And within about 6 months of being there, I knew I can't do this for the rest of my life. I don't know if I can do this for an entire year. And I started looking into what else can I do. So I'm on Career Builder and I'm looking for anything within the mental health field. And I keep seeing postings for social worker, clinical counselor, social worker, licensed clinical counselor, and they're all paying, starting upwards of around $45,000-$50,000 a year. So to a 24-year-old just out of college making maybe 30,000 a year, this is like, it's real money. I can be making real money. But then I realized, no, it requires a master's degree. How do I get a master's degree? And so I shoot an email to one of my mentors from college, from undergrad, who said to me, look, I know the kind of student you were. I know the kind of therapist that you could be, psychologist, therapist, otherwise. Take the GRE. I know your transcripts. I will work with you. I will get you into Fairleigh's master's program. We'll move from there. And that was all she wrote.
That's great. And again, maybe being a bit too obvious for our audience, but it took you, a bad work experience to make you revisit, going back to where your passion lied or your true interest lied. Um,
Absolutely.
and now I think certainly when I started working a million years ago, dinosaurs roamed the earth, etc. But it was the expectation was you picked a company and you stayed with it for a very long period of time, and now it's the expectation is individuals are empowered to move around as often or as quickly as they need to. So, so I wonder if there's a balance that, wondering what people are chasing. And this is, I don't know if there's an answer to this, but, if you're moving a lot versus not moving at all, I don't know, necessarily think either's bad, but just interesting how the world has changed. I guess that's really my observation. So you went back to Fairleigh Dickinson for a master's degree, and you had to work, right? And
Yes.
what kind of work were you doing while you were studying?
While I was in grad school at Fairleigh, I was a caseworker within the children's system of care. So what that means is children struggling with emotional disorders, developmental delays, anybody who might have been on the autism spectrum disorder, and who was struggling both individually and at the family system level. So struggling with parents, struggling with school, things like that, who needed a whole lot of help would wind up receiving a caseworker to put them in touch with therapists, mentors, behavior assistants. If things got so out of hand that they needed an out-of-home residential placement, the caseworker's job, the title was care manager. It was their job to make sure that happened, to facilitate that. So that was what I did, and it required not only being able to navigate multiple systems, so DCP&P, which used to be called DIFUS, the juvenile justice system, the sometimes even the adult mental health system. You had to be able to navigate that, but you also had to have the interpersonal and we'll call it quasi-clinical skills to join with kids, to join with their parents, to recognize family systems, and to work effectively while maintaining boundaries. So it was very much a formative learning experience, both professionally and clinically.
And I think you mentioned to me the other day that you actually had a couple of really good mentors there as well. Is that right?
I did. Yes, both of whom were direct supervisors. One who was a still working professional counselor, another who, very sadly, we lost about 3 years ago. The latter was one of the people who almost immediately made me feel safe. So when I started at this organization, I was coming off of working in an incredibly toxic corporate environment, where not only did I feel unheard and unlistened to and unvalued, I felt very belittled, as though anytime I opened my mouth, I was immediately going to be shut down and told that I was the dumbest person in the room.
Wow.
Go to working with this agency, I'm meeting with this supervisor who was the clinical director at the time. And he's asking me my opinion on things. And not just asking me my opinion, but respecting what I have to say. And it's less of a, well, I'm going to see if you're where I want you to be, and more of a dialogue where it almost felt like talking to a peer. And that did wonders to kind of wipe away the, we'll call it a little t trauma of working at this other company, and make me feel, well, restore the confidence that I had already had,
Yeah.
and he was one of the people that kind of helped me establish my clinical style and how I interact with clients and how I relate to people.
Well, that's great. That's so good. So lucky to have somebody like that, particularly after such a bad experience. So for many of our interns who will be interested in pursuing a master's degree and are in a position where they're likely going to have to work, how this might be interesting. How did you achieve balance there? Because even in having to work through college, because as a young man, I would not have wanted to do that. I would have said that's too hard. I'm just going to work. and given up on, and I did give up on the idea of a master's degree just because I just didn't have that in me. So where did that come from in you? I guess we kind of heard some of this already. You always wanted to be some type of psychologist, and you had a bad professional experience that pushed you back into it. But more practically, how did that work for you when you were studying and working?
Barely. It was the job itself was incredibly stressful. It was a 40-hour-a-week job on paper. In practice, it was 50 to 60 hours because there was on-call hours that had to be done. There was traveling literally all over the state and sometimes into Pennsylvania. So the commute also factored into it. It was incredibly difficult, and then after working a full day, to have to go to class, 2-3 days a week, to get reading in, to write papers, to take tests, or to study for tests. It was incredibly difficult. I cannot in good conscience recommend it to anybody, but I know that there are going to be people out there who have to do it. So I would say it is doable. Just expect it to be very, very difficult. What helped me was during times when class was not in session, so breaks for the winter and the summer. I took a break. I didn't do anything other than what I wanted to restore myself when I could. Obviously I still had to go to work, but after working hours, my time was my time. I spent it with friends. I spent it with my girlfriend. I spent it going out and doing things that I really enjoyed. And at times it was a struggle. At other times, taking those breaks was exactly what I needed.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think sort of in my day job, we talk a lot about well-being and the importance of finding that time to restore yourself, however you do. But equally saying, well, I'm gonna have to work really hard and sacrifice whatever it is that I would want to do, but this is the work time. But then you can make sure that you have that personal time for yourself is critically important. And if you don't, then the burnout just means you're never gonna get there. You're never gonna finish. You're never gonna stick it out.
The burnout will happen very quickly if you're not able to give yourself that time, and sometimes it requires a sense of entitlement. I've worked so hard, I am entitled to me time. I am allowed to take me time.
That's great, and not feel guilty. Yeah,
Well,
yeah, very important.
you're going to feel guilty. Guilt, it's an emotional experience that people have, but just with all emotional experiences, they don't stay. It'll pass.
Yeah, yeah. So what was that first master's degree? They were both in psychology, but they were different focuses. What was the first one in?
So the first was in theoretical psychology, and that was essentially a feeder into a PhD program. And during that master's, I recognized I don't want that doctorate. I don't want to go through the process of it. I don't want to spend the majority of my life doing research. I want to be in the trenches helping people. I could have applied for Doctor of Psychology programs called a PsyD, which would also make me a psychologist. But that would be a little bit more difficult to get into because that focuses very heavily on what clinical experience do you have prior to applying. And it's very difficult to get any serious clinical experience when you're not a clinician and can't do the work. And so after graduating with my first master's, I took a year to just kind of work, build up a little bit of money, enjoy not being in school, and then applied to William Patterson, where I worked towards and ultimately achieved my second master's in clinical counseling psychology. Didn't work through that master's. I learned that lesson.
You didn't work through that second one.
No, I learned that lesson.
So, and you made a funny comment. You're like, I don't advise anyone getting married while they're in grad school.
No, I absolutely do not. If you have a partner and you love them and you want to be married, get married. It's a beautiful thing. The process of getting married it's difficult and it's stressful. And when you're already in grad school and experiencing stress, you don't want to compound that. You also don't want to be jet lagged after your honeymoon and have to go to class.
Oh yeah, that'd be tough. Cool. So in terms of that journey, so you didn't have to work while well, maybe take a step back. What were you still with I forget the name of the organization, the children's, where you were case
No,
managed?
the care management organization. No, I had left there.
Okay. What did you do in that intervening year?
No, I left there about 6 months before starting at William Patterson. So I essentially had a spring and
Oh, okay.
summer
Okay, cool. Okay,
to
cool. Cool,
decompress.
cool.
Right.
And then so um after you got your second master's degree, did you hang a shingle? How did you get started?
Oh, if only. So to become I won't speak to what it takes to become a licensed clinical social worker because I'm not one. I will speak to
Chris just froze. See if he comes back.
Yeah, it's frozen on my end as well.
professional counselor.
So
To
Chris,
start with, you have to have all of the credit. Can you hear me?
yeah, you froze there for a minute, unfortunately. And I'm going to ask Carolyn and Valeria, thank you for keeping your cameras on, but let's try you guys turning them off too, if that might help the bandwidth issue. And Chris, so you said if it were only that easy to go right into practice, and then the screen froze. So can you pick that
Okay.
up?
Yes. So in order to become a professional counselor in New Jersey, first you have to have all the credit hours. I believe it was 60 as a master's, from a master's program that the state will accept. From there, you can apply to take a licensing exam. The board meets, at least at the time, 2, maybe 3 times a year. No, excuse me, the board met 4 times a year. The test was only offered 2 times a year. So I had to had to be accepted and allowed to sit and take it at the right time. Once you've taken the exam, those results get sent back to the board, who then determines whether or not you are eligible to work as a licensed associate counselor. The whole process can take, I want to say, at the minimum 6 months. For me, it took close to a year. But even then, you can't work for yourself. You need to have so many hours and so many years, professional counselor, a psychologist, or licensed clinical social worker. Am I still coming through? I want to make sure I didn't freeze.
Yeah. No, we lost you for a second, but I got it. So you were saying normally it could take 6 months, but it took you a year to get that
Yes.
the approval, and that you can't just go right in and say, here I am, start recruiting new patients. You have to do other things first.
You have to work under the supervision of a professional counselor or a psychologist or a licensed clinical social worker.
Okay.
So I did that.
So just thinking about, again, this keeping your eye on the prize of getting there, but having to sort of you needed money, you were getting married, you had to work through that, you needed to take the test, you needed to get approved, then you needed to find I guess another practice to work in order to get
Correct.
that experience.
Yes. So after college, while waiting to get my license, I ended up actually teaching as an adjunct. I'm seeing the message in the chat. The counseling exam is called the NCE, the National Counselor Exam.
And so by the name of that, that's everyone. It's not a New Jersey thing. It's a national exam.
No, that's a national exam.
Cool.
The good news is you only have to take that once. With social work, so you only have to take one.
So
Did I
you
freeze again?
froze there again for a second. So social work, you have to take ongoing exams. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, there's an exam after your master's program, and then to become a clinical social worker, there's an exam there. Professional counselors only have the one exam.
Okay. Okay. Cool. And so you went through that process, and eventually you got to go out on your own. How long did that take?
Oh, 5 years. In that time, I worked in a community mental health center under supervision with some absolutely amazing psychotherapists whom I learned an awful lot from, both professional counselors, psychologists, and licensed clinical social workers. Also in that time, my wife and I had our 2 children, which required at one point taking some time away from working, which prolonged the process of getting my final license. So I think it was 2018 we opened the practice, but at the time I was still working at this community mental health center.
Okay. Okay. And then you had to build up your caseload.
Right.
So the big question is, you having grown up with a degree of financial insecurity, when you had to leave Bowie State, and all the things that came after, and having to work through school, and then work to get approved to become a therapist or an independent operator, as I would call it. When did you achieve a sense of financial security? Because that is such a pressing concern.
I'll let you know when I get there.
Okay. Well, they say everybody thinks they need to earn, no matter how much you earn, you need to double what your current salary is to be your projection for when you feel financially secure. So I guess people never, even if you're a millionaire, you don't always feel secure. But at some point, when did you just say, oh, my life is going, or maybe you're not there yet. I don't know. What do you think?
I'll tell you when I felt comfortable. I wouldn't say I feel financially stable, because student loans exist and mortgages exist and taxes exist. There's always somebody that you owe money to. I will say, though, that I felt comfortable about 8 months ago. So I left the community mental health center, which was a full-time job. I left that in May of 2022.
Okay.
And went into business for myself full-time. And that was anxiety inducing. That was scary, but I had faith in myself. My wife is also a psychotherapist. She's a licensed clinical social worker. She's my partner in the business. She had faith in me. I had faith in her. We were able to build and work for ourselves.
That's great.
And when it comes to the financial aspect of it, for me, the satisfaction is less in making as much money as I can. The satisfaction is more in being my own boss, and being able to make decisions for me that are right for me. This is what I have ultimately worked for. So the satisfaction is in achieving a dream.
That's great. That's amazing. Congratulations. That's pretty
Thank
cool. So what's a day in the life like for you? Is it, I know when we've had to arrange some of these calls, we had to find a slot that you didn't actually have an appointment, right? So are you just back to back, or do you, and I think it's interesting. I mean, again, you don't have to be interested in going into therapy to to find this interesting, but particularly for those of us in the group that are, do you, as I understand it, there's like an hour slot and you might talk for 50 minutes, and then do you go right into another appointment right after that?
Oh, I take the time between. I thankfully am not back to back anymore. That is not a tenable way of working. That's not sustainable. I think at most I will have maybe a session, but that varies depending on people's schedules, and my schedule and my requirements from day to day. So no, the average day in life looks like waking up 7 in the morning, helping the kids get off to school, or now it's summer camp, going, preparing for work, going in, seeing clients. I'm usually in session around 10. I don't have any 9 o'clock clients right now. I'm usually in session until about 2 or 3. Got a nice break in the afternoon. Come home, fix dinner for the kids. Then 2-3 days a week in the evenings, I'm back in the office from about 5-6 until 8.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so that's interesting. So you have a
Yes.
long day, but you do have time
Yes.
and got it.
I also
Cool.
get to set my own hours. I get to choose what my work week is. So most people will work Monday to Friday. I can't always work when everybody else is, because people have jobs. They're there. Some people are able to take an hour break during their day. Some people work off hours the way I do, and I can see them during the day. Others need to be seen either on the weekends or in the evenings. So I actually work Sunday to Thursday as kind of a throwback to when I was working full time. I have a couple of Sunday clients who can't come in any other day of the week. So I work Sunday to Thursday. But Friday is my self-care day. The kids are at school or they're at camp. I have the majority of the day to do what I want or do what I need to around the house. And it works very well.
Good. That's great. And do you have any sort of hobbies or things that are completely unrelated to your job that you do? Like, are you a golfer or
No.
that?
I dabble in playing golf occasionally. No, I would not call myself a golfer. I have gotten into amateur woodworking. I enjoy that. I am a super nerd, so comic books, movies, sci-fi, gaming, video games, all those things I absolutely love. Being able to take a Friday morning and see a movie that comes out, or Friday early morning or early afternoon to see a movie that's come out, is a wonderful thing. So yeah, that's kind of where
Cool.
my hobbies lie.
Good. So I'm going to ask you one last question or two, and then just giving our interns heads up that we'll open it up for some questions at the end. But so through all of your life experiences, both not only just your own personal life experience, but also because of the work you do, what advice would you give to our interns, given where they are in their lives? So the vast majority, if not all of them, are on the call or either in college or have just finished college. What is your advice to them?
Keep going. You've come through some very difficult things. For a lot of people, high school is very difficult. For some people, it's not, but then college becomes difficult. We're living in very interesting times, and the world is changing. Expectations are changing. You're going to have a lot more options and a lot more power than I in my generation and generations before us. Boundaries, stick
Chris,
to your boundaries, but also
just
you
one
need to
quick.
go.
Well, so sorry, you froze again there. So you said, and I think this is important. So let's go back. So you said this generation is going to have a lot more options than your generation did. And then
And then generations past. Yes. as you said, the work expectations. We no longer live in a world where you get hired at one job and you work there the rest of your life. You don't have to do that anymore. There's any number of options for how you can both make enough money to live and do something that is fulfilling to you. So find the job that is fulfilling to you. Find the career path that is fulfilling to you. Set your boundaries, but also be willing to compromise. Because if you can't compromise, you're not going to get where you need to go.
Yeah, that is great advice. One of the things that I was trying to drill into my kids as they were growing up, and with mixed results. My daughter's still in college, my son is out. But finding your passion or your purpose and going for it, and that you can be fulfilled doing what you're doing. You don't necessarily need to be chasing the money. And I think when I was a young man, I was so consumed with earning enough money that I didn't pursue what I was necessarily really passionate about. And I found that passion in other parts of my life now, fortunately. But is there a secret that you can apply to helping somebody identify what that passion or purpose is if they don't really know? And I'm thinking, again, projecting, but thinking about the conversations I've had with my son, who'd kill me if he knew I was sharing this. But like, what do you really want to do? What gives you a lot of energy and excitement? And he was still very focused on earning enough money to feel financially independent. So that's the direction he went.
I don't think there is a secret. I think it's about finding what you love. I love building relationships and building rapport with people. When I'm not doing this, I'm also teaching and I'm coaching. I teach at William Patterson and I coach my son's soccer team. These are the things that I'm passionate about. And I have found ways to turn my passions into a career. So I would say, what are you passionate about? What brings you joy? Is there a way that joy can also be economically fulfilling also?
Good. That's good. So what is your joy? I think is a great question for us to all reflect on. Thank you for that. Any last comments, Chris, before we haven't had any more chats come through, but I want to just give the interns a chance to ask questions, but any other thoughts from you or comments?
No, not really.
Okay, no, good, great. Your advice was great. So let's just see, are there any questions? If people want to come off mute, Valeria?
Yeah.
Andrew, there's two questions.
Hi. Thank you can you hear me?
Yes.
Alrighty. So thank you for everything you said, for sharing your story. I thought it was really interesting when you said that emotions are not, forever, that they'll go away. And I guess I am not the best or haven't been the best at handling stressful situations, or like you said, just like when unexpected things happen that you find yourself in a problem where you don't even know how to start, or what to do. What are some like practices that maybe help you with that, or like to cope with that stress, or maybe help make that feeling go away quicker?
Remembering that I don't have to be the best. I don't even have to be great at managing stress. I have to be good enough.
So Chris,
letting myself be okay with experiencing anger, frustration, anxiety. These are very human emotions. They're human experiences. Am I frozen again? I'm frozen.
You cut out there for a little bit, but you've come back.
Okay.
You don't have to be the best in that, and that it's okay to feel those feelings. I think was what I took away.
Yes, I can give myself permission to be upset. Give myself permission to be scared, to be frustrated, to be sad, whatever it is. you know, if I need a moment, I need a moment. We all do sometimes. It's okay.
Thank you.
I hope that answers the question. You're
Yes.
welcome.
So,
Andrew, there's a few questions that
yeah,
came in the chat. Can you
I
catch
see
them?
that.
Okay.
So Stephen asked, do you ever did you ever doubt your choice of career?
Oh, absolutely. When my grades were suffering in college, I thought, well, I'm never going to be a psychologist. I started asking myself, what else could I do with life? I've always loved movies ever since I was a little boy, and so I said, all right, well, maybe I'll become a filmmaker, and spent my last 2 semesters in college. Yeah, 2 semesters learning about filmmaking and how to write and how to, you know, how to hold a camera, how to edit, things like that. And I mean, ultimately, I didn't become a filmmaker, but it was still fun to learn, and it was helpful to know that I had options, that I hadn't put all my eggs into one basket.
That's great. Thank you.
I'd like
Go
to
on.
ask something else. How did you deal with the doubt?
So Chris is frozen, I think. But the question, Stephen, I think you asked is, how did you deal with the doubt when you weren't sure you were going the right way?
Yes.
With the doubt,
Maybe we can bring them back. And we've lost his picture.
Did we lose them?
I think, well, okay, Chris, you disappeared. I'm gonna stop my video just for that.
Am I
Because
still
we
frozen?
didn't hear. No, you're back, but I'm gonna
Okay.
stop my video just to see if that helps. And then, yeah, it was how do you deal with the doubt was the question.
How do I deal with it now, or how did I deal with it then?
How did you deal with it then?
Not well. I wouldn't say I slipped into depression, but I was very sad for a very long period of time, and very frustrated. There were a lot of unhelpful thoughts that came up, but talking to friends and having friends help me explore what my options could be was probably the biggest help. So I said, I had been interested in filmmaking. I was sharing it randomly with a friend one day, and she said, "Oh, my boyfriend's a filmmaker. He's an editor. Maybe you could talk to him." And bam, the hope came right back, and that helped me to deal with the doubt.
Right. Very good. Cool. And then Aisha has asked the question, what is a quote that you live by?
There's two. One is from a college professor, well, a late college professor by the name of Randy Pausch. And if you ever get the chance to see his final lecture, it's kind of like a TED talk. I would highly recommend it. And the quote is, whenever somebody really upsets you, when they're really frustrating and they disappoint you, don't get disheartened. They just haven't given you enough. You haven't given them enough chances to really impress you yet. And in my personal life, I find that to be really helpful. Waiting and being patient, waiting for someone to impress me, really tell me.
See if he comes back.
And then the second one is actually from King Edward. I'm frozen again.
You're back now.
Okay, good. The second quote is from I think it was King Edward III, whoever Queen Elizabeth's father was. The highest of distinction is the service to others. That's one that keeps me going when I feel like I don't know why I do what I do.
That's a really powerful one. I like that. Thank you for that. So we're at time, but we have 2 more questions. Do you have another minute?
I actually do.
Okay, cool. So Abby has a nice compliment in her quote, but coincidentally, she is majoring in psychology and film, and wanted to ask, what would be your advice for someone who is trying to find where those two intersect? Is there a field where those two come together?
Documentary filmmaking.
There
Definitely
you go.
documentary filmmaking.
And the next question was somebody who this summer is producing a documentary. So it's no surprise to me that Leslie Ann asked this question. Was filmmaking your creative outlet? What type of films did you make or write?
The first student film was just a real piece to see if I do. I called it the breakup, and it was about 2 people who were completely mismatched for each other, deciding, you know what, we can't do this anymore. Very, very art house. The second one that I did was, and problematic as he is, he did cosmic horror. So I wrote a version of one of my favorite stories finished and was never able to complete it.
And you sadly you cut out a little bit for that, but I think you were saying the very first one was just to figure out how to do it, and then when you actually got into it, it was the 2 people whose stars did not align and had to make a decision. And then the one, was it Vanished? Was that the inspiration?
No, there was no real inspiration for that first movie. It was just an idea that I had in my head.
No, sorry, the second one, the second film. What was the inspiration? All right. Well, I think did we
We
just
lost him.
Yeah, I think we've lost him entirely. So unfortunately, we clearly had some technology bandwidth issues.
Here.
Oh, you're there. Okay. All right. What was
Zoom
I thought
kicked me out and then let me back in.
Okay, good. Well, you sound very clear now.
I don't know what happened. I guess Zoom doesn't like me.
Well, well, I mean, that was good. I think you gave Leslie Ann a sense of what you worked on, and we are now well over, but I'm so grateful for your time and your insights and your experiences. I think are all going to be very helpful to us to carry forward. So thank you for that, Chris.
You're very welcome. I'm glad to have been part of this.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks, everyone, for coming out.